Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Larry Lursey. Welcome back to the channel. We've got a very special episode this time because it's not only going to be one of our vacation photo rescue episodes, but it's going to be a special international edition of the vacation photo rescue. Basically, I reached out to Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor. She's up in Canada, runs a cool YouTube channel, and I will put a link to that down below where you can check her out. I thought it would be fun to trade a couple of our images. I'm sending her two of mine. She's sending me two of hers. And we're going to retouch both of them, all four of them actually, and then get back online together and compare them and see how the images went in different directions and how we kind of decided to take them creatively. So it should be interesting to see how two different people work on the same images. And so we've got four different images for you to look at. Should be a lot of fun. I've got no idea how this is going to turn out, but I've got my fingers crossed. If you haven't already done so, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. As you know, I'm trying to reach 1 billion subscribers. And as you can see from the graphic here, I'm still a little bit short of reaching that goal. But with your help, I think we can make it by the end of the year. I'm starting to get a little worried about it, but I still think it's doable. So I'm going to be doing most of my editing in Luminar AI. And if you don't already have Luminar AI, I will give you a coupon code later in the video where you can get it at a discount. Enough of that, it's time to get to work editing some images. So without any further ado, let's roll the intro. All right, so I am talking today with Darlene Hildebrandt, who is all the way up in Canada, Edmonton, correct?
That's right.
I'm all the way down in Texas, so we are kind of stretching the limits of North America right here. And I have done a series called Vacation Photo Rescue, where I go through and take troublesome travel images and try and make them better through different means. And Darlene does a lot of image editing as well. And we came across each other, and so I thought it would be fun for us to get together. And what we did is we exchanged a few images, and we both kind of worked them up, and we're going to compare them and see how it works out. Which was the toughest one for you, Darlene, of the four images?
Well, I chose to do the sheep in the field. Let me just share my screen here. And for a little bit of background on me for your readers is I do have a YouTube channel as well. So yes, we found each other and Larry asked me to do this. And I thought, oh, that'd be kind of fun because I edit subscriber images all the time. So I'd love to edit another photographer's images and just see, you know, how our interpretation is different, our techniques, our approach is different, and maybe we can learn something in the process too.
Right. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. It's very interesting. Do you find that you approach editing images differently when it's your image versus someone else's image?
No, I don't actually. I mean, my head is my head no matter what image I'm looking at. And when I do a weekly live actually on my YouTube channel where I edit subscriber images, and I talked about it the other day where it's like, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? How do I approach an image? What am I doing to that thing? But why am I doing it? Why am I cropping that out? Why am I rotating it? Why am I toning this down? And I have a few tricks that I might pull up my sleeve as well and show.
Well, good.
Okay, so the sheep, now my monitor is over here, so I'm just going to be looking over here. So the sheep I found was had potential because I thought there was lots of texture in the field, and I wanted to bring that out and that front sheep. And then obviously there was some issues with sort of sky being washed out and the cars and the road in the background, right? So my workflow is I use Lightroom predominantly as my main editor. Then I will pull things into Luminar and or Photoshop, depending on how complex an edit. And right before we started this call, I was actually trying to move the sheep. So I wasn't successful at it, but I may continue playing around with it. But I'll show you what I came up with in Lightroom first.
Okay.
I have to get over to Lightroom. Okay, so that's my Lightroom edit. So I chose to go really dark. I darkened the sky down. I used some graduated filters, some radial filters, really punched up the texture on that sheep. And actually I was able to successfully clone out the cars right in Lightroom. I thought I would have to go to Photoshop and use the patch tool or content aware, but I was able to use the cloning tool right in Lightroom. So the before, oops, let's go over here. So there's the before. I cropped it in quite significantly as well. And let's see, that's my crop. So I straightened the horizon based on the road, cropped it in fairly significantly. And I didn't think that the sky added a lot to it because I wanted to focus on that sheep. And I just kept a little bit of it just to have that rolling hill in the background. So again, my idea was I wanted to move the sheep over to the left so he had more space to move in front of him. And I was trying to do that in Photoshop with the move tool, but I haven't successfully done that yet. I may keep trying. And then I just funked it up a little bit in Luminar. So that's my final edit.
Very cool.
So how does that differ from yours?
Okay, so here's where we started.
Yep.
Get this over from behind you. First thing I did is went through and cleaned up some things. I cleaned up some of that little junk in the grass, took out the cars, kind of same thing, leveled it like you did. So I kind of made a lot of the same repairs. Then I took it into Luminar and basically punched up a bunch of stuff. Brought in the sky and sort of played around with the texture and the contrast. Ended up actually going with the putting a little bit of a glow to it because I kind of liked how I wasn't, as much as I love the things happening back here, I felt like they were kind of distracting as well. So with that in mind, I went with a sky that was better than what we had, obviously, but not distracting. Wasn't big bold clouds or I don't know about you, but I feel like so many times I'm tempted to, oh, well, wouldn't it be great to have that giant sunset back there? But it's just not always appropriate. And so I wanted something back there, but I wanted a lot of this to kind of go away and just be these lines and textures and even the sheep to a certain extent. So I kind of went with a little more of a glow back here and came up with that, which isn't too far off where you were. I left a little more space around it, but a lot of the same thought process, I think. And then I finally did a little levels to
Punch it up,
give it just a little more snap.
Yeah.
So
yours is a bit on the cooler side. I added a lot of warmth to mine, so it's a bit oranger. Maybe make the image a little bigger because it's only filling half of
oh, sorry about that. Let's come
in there. Yeah.
I don't know. Let's do Cuba here. I love this. So this was the base, and because I made a little bit of changes, I just wanted to show where we started. I did a few tiny tweaks first before I got going. I was a little bugged by that, and I wasn't sure how that was going to work. It ended up, in hindsight, it wouldn't have even made a difference, but I went ahead and did a little bit of a perspective and cropped in a tiny bit on it. The only other thing I did as far as changing something to the structure of it is I took out the light areas in here.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Let me get the other one over here. There we go. Okay. So this was, again, the basic image, but kind of repositioned with a slight crop to it. So anyway, so the first thing I did was move that door up that way and came in, got rid of those kind of the light trap there. I was trying to bring everything I could up to here.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That's a good point.
Well, it was hard, and you know how this goes. A lot of it is you're trying to decide what direction you want to go with it. And so sometimes what I will do is, like when I took this one into first, because it's hard too, because in a lot of ways, honestly, I look at an image like this and I think, well, I don't know there's not a lot of stuff really to do to this one. You know what I mean? I kind of like it as it is, but that makes for a very boring video. So I said, okay. And so I went into Luminar and I tried sometimes I'll go in templates and just start clicking down and trying, because you can't tell from those names, there'll be one called San Diego or something. I don't know what that means, and half of them, but all of a sudden I clicked on one that kind of took it in a weird direction. And I go, oh, I kind of like that, but I don't like how they did it. So then I came back here and decided what I was going to do. And that kind of necessitated me getting rid of that light area there as best I could. So that was the long drawn out thought process.
Gotcha.
So when I went to Luminar, and maybe it was before I went to Luminar, I went ahead and took away the color here and tried to make it, because I was going to be going to a black and white image, like a high key black and white, not fully black and white, but a very pastel type thing. So I wanted to take away some of that rich color like that. And again, I knew it was going to be covered up, so I wasn't too worried about the exact tone and things like that. So here's all my Luminar junk in here. So I kind of went extreme here, and I threw some texture at it and kind of went with a little more of a blown out route with a kind of a deckled edge around it. And the full-on process would be, I would go ahead and probably print this on watercolor paper and maybe even deckle the edges around it or something like that. So that was kind of doesn't translate as well digitally, but I thought it would be beautiful on a watercolor to really enhance some of that texture. Yeah. And so it pulls out a lot of the darkness, but you still kind of have this nice leading line from the frames. You've got the contrast of this whole area on the dark, and the light kind of just bleeds in from the edge. And so I thought she kind of jumped out and was just a kind of a different take on it to try and push it in a different direction. So
that's very interesting. Yeah, because I would not have, I didn't consider going with a high key version of it. So that's a very different take on what I did. So do you want to see my version?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to see. Let me.
Okay. So there's the original, and it was a little bit dark. So I think you probably punched up the brightness a little bit when you were doing your editing. Like if I look at the histogram here, where is it? Yeah, so it's a little bit on the underexposed side. So I did slightly punch that up. Let me get this zoom thing off the window here. So what I did so I generally do a Lightroom edit first. So this is my Lightroom version. Like I said, I punched up the exposure so you could see the histogram is a little better, punched up the contrast. And I use a lot of radial filters and edge filters, graduated filters, right? So here I'm punching the exposure on her, darkening the edges in the background. And then I actually just punched up the skirt a little bit and added texture to it. So I use that texture and clarity selectively as a selective edit, as opposed to a global edit. And mine is a little bit cooler. I think I did do a correction on the door as well, but I definitely went darker than your opposite direction of yours.
Right.
And now that you've pointed out this little window in here, I kind of want to go in, at least tone it down. Mm-hmm. And then my final edit, I took it into Luminar and I applied a template that I have, which makes it sort of an antique sepia. And I could have done that in Lightroom as well with the color grading and so on. But I like some of the tools in Luminar. I'll use super contrast a lot. I use Mystify a lot. And I use the portrait tools as well. So I probably use the portrait tools on her to do some skin smoothing and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely brings light to the face. It's so funny because, you know, I don't know how you were with these, but like I tried multiple things on some of these. And originally my first thought when I saw that, like when I got this image, my first thought before I started working on it is I'm going to go black and white and I'm going to bring it down and do more of a mysterious, moody type dark. And it wasn't until I stumbled onto that high key look that I went the other direction. But my first thought was go the other direction. But honestly, what I was worried about was there was between the dress and the door, I was like, boy, that's an awful lot of white that I'm not going to be able to do as dark as I wanted to go. And so that's when I kind of shifted directions. But you've kind of found a nice medium between those two where it just kind of still has, like you said, that antique type look. But
yeah, you can see I smoothed out her skin quite a bit here, and I actually added grain in Luminar. So I used the film grain tool to add grain because I really like that sort of that antique look, right? And the sepia. So I used to shoot film and was a film shooter from years ago. So, and now that you've mentioned that, I got to fix the verticals now. There we go. That's better.
But again, like I said, this one to me was difficult because I kind of liked it how it was. And I kept getting to the point of, well, this looks cool, but it's not cooler than the original, and so it's always difficult, but that was very pretty though. So anyways, what do you got next?
Okay, so now I'm just gonna unshare because I don't want you to see the I don't want you to see the cathedral before the actual reveal here. So let me
Oh my gosh.
Before on the screen. And it's interesting that we both chose sort of like a old setting, right? The one you chose for me was Italy. So where is this, by the way? I'd love to know where this was shot.
I think it's called Glastonbury. It's like, I don't know, maybe supposedly I think it's where King Arthur's remains were found at some point, which I don't know if that's possible, but somewhere. It's like one of the oldest remaining churches in England, or what, I don't know what qualifies it as still being a church or whatever, but
gotcha. So I did a bunch of stuff to this, and I'm just going to give you the final reveal because I pulled it into Luminar. And that's my final edit. So I did do a sky replacement. And I love the fact that it replaces the sky. Let me just turn on my little pointer everywhere. Like it found the sky in here and it found the sky in here. Because I've actually tested Photoshop sky replacement versus Luminar's. And I know some other people have done comparisons. And I actually have found on pictures like this, Luminar does a better job because Photoshop on one that I had where the sky was segmented like this, Photoshop didn't find the other pieces of the sky. So I did, where are we here?
This is so interesting that you say that because I was planning on asking you, because I ran into a problem with the exact thing you're talking about, that open archway and then the window in the upper right.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't putting the sky, the one in the upper right, you could see something back there, but it wasn't as clear as yours. And the doorway, it was about 2/3 of it I could see sky, but then it stopped. And so I was having the problem where it wasn't IDing. It's very odd that we were using, maybe you tweaked one of us tweaked the file first.
What I did in Luminar is if I open this one up again, and I go in to replace it, I'll just do a quick one here. So I think I opened up, yeah, I did a TIFF. I'm just going to do a JPEG for speed purposes here. What I did was there's that new thing where you can adjust the horizon or the vertical adjustment of the sky. Right. So I actually had to lower it to make it go down there because I did find the same thing happened. It wasn't going down far enough. Like it wasn't quite finding the right position of the horizon. Right. So hopefully when we go in here, it's going to work right out of the gate. Actually, let me just try one of my templates because I have a new set of templates that I'm just making for Skylum, actually for portraits. But one of them has a sky replacement with one of my own skies. So let me just pop that in there. And then, so yeah, I'm using the horizon position here. Mm-hmm. I'm in a little bit, well, it's not so much. What I did was I shifted this horizon position, like it's -3 now, but if I shift it down a little bit more, right, then it kind of comes over that area there, right? And then I just play with, make sure my blending is good as well. So I find that horizon blending, increasing that solves a lot of the problems there, right? Also under mask refinement, I find, this is my personal settings. I use fixed details fairly high, and I find that if I go close gaps, it actually makes more gaps, which doesn't make any sense. Okay. But you can see that the sky, like it is in that upper corner, because if I move it left to right, you can see it moving in the window, right?
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, I need to compare what my settings were to yours, because I was running into difficulty with that. And you'll see it on the final image. I got it. I kind of ended up working around it on mine, but.
So I'm just going to cancel out of that. Yes, I do want to quit. To go back to Lightroom here. So I did some work on it in Lightroom. I did some distortion correction. You can see that I've done the tilt and the perspective correction, cropped it a tiny bit. And then I did a lot of dodging in this area down here. And then I used the structure filter in Luminar to give structure to the buildings. And I also added a sun rays. So the sun rays are not in that shot, you know, the sky. That's another one of my own skies. And I added the birds just because I could. Why not?
Right.
They kind of work with the, you know, the ethereal cathedral, like, you know, can you see the angels, hear the angels singing, right? That was kind of the direction that I went with it. But I knew immediately that I wanted to bring out the texture of the building and to replace that sky that was blown out.
Yeah. I love the structure tool for these type buildings and things.
Yeah. And I masked it so it didn't apply to the sky as well.
Oh, it's great. Safe to say you improved that one.
All right. Well, I'm keen to see your version of it.
Oh God, I'm dreading this one.
Uh-oh.
It's not terrible, but failed one. That was the failed attempt. I decided to go the dark nighttime route.
I thought about that.
I felt like the sky just didn't look right. But what I ended up having to do was, this thing was, I had to go through and I added the sky. Then I had to, but because it wasn't working here, I had to go ahead and clone some stuff down here and into the window, and then bring it back into Luminar to do all the rest of the stuff. And so I was just struggling with how to do that. And for some reason, it wasn't catching on my image. And so that was the kind of the failed attempt. And so I was okay with it, but it just kind of looked sort of silly. So I started over this morning on it and ended up with this one, which is much more in the realm of yours. It's very funny because obviously we both had to replace the sky.
Yeah.
But I put the light rays through here because I had this window that you can see it wasn't picking up the sky opening. And I go, oh, well, it would make sense if the sun was coming from over here. That I could have rays coming through here, and maybe this is some sort of a hallway down here, and that's why it doesn't have rays coming through it. So I put the rays up there much the same way. And
yeah, that works. That works.
Yeah, so it worked okay. Again, kind of along the same lines, and tried to, because the dilemma, I'm sure for you, was for me, was having the bright blown out area, then the dark underexposed area.
Yeah.
And
I did crop out that little bit at the top because it bugged me. There's that little triangle of white right up there.
Yes. Yeah, I've got it kind of blocked with my screen sharing thing, but
yeah,
in the old one, in the rough draft one I showed you, I cloned that out, but I forgot about it on this one. Now it's going to bug me, but
I found when I did the perspective just correction, it actually removed it. So
okay. Well, yeah, so that one turned out okay, but that was a struggle. I spent a lot of time on that one. I just could not, sometimes it clicks, you're doing one and just the next thing, every step makes it look better. I always try to, when I do one thing, in whether it's Photoshop or Luminar or whatever, I'll try that. And then I always turn it off and on and go, am I at a better place now than I was a few minutes ago? And with this one, I just kept going, I'm not. It was better before. And so I just kept trying stuff. And that's almost the problem I run into, is there's almost too many tools that you keep trying stuff that you don't need. And then finally you kind of go, okay, this is the direction to go. And again, I went with a more toned down sky. It is funny that we both went with the light streaks coming through there. That's funny.
Yeah, I do like the black and white conversion though. I think that really works on it as well. And maybe there's some merit in trying to work that night sky a little darker, because I did like that idea too.
Yeah. Well, interesting. To show everybody first what it looked like. And very cool. Where in Italy is this?
It's Venice. That's the great.
It is Venice. Okay. I was guessing, but so this was a really cool one, and I struggled with what direction to go. So this one, I kind of decided to go in a crazy direction. So brace yourself.
Okay.
You're probably going to hate this.
Well, I did some funky stuff with it too. So
it's like someone changing your children though, I don't know. Okay. So what I did here, what happened here?
Looks squished.
Yeah. So, well, I did squish it. I took it in and made it a square, but I didn't crop most of it. Most of it, I actually did a distort type of a transform without the, not what do you call it when you're not?
Yeah.
So I actually scrunched it in and kind of made these go into more of a, you couldn't almost tell what they were. These lines started becoming more solid and almost just became one big hulking structure. So that was the first step. Then I went through and of course unleashed Luminar on it and kind of went this direction. I went with a sky in there, tried to warm things up a lot, and really kind of tried to play up the color and give it almost like a painterly type feel. I felt like that it caused kind of this beautiful warmth through here and kind of drew your eye down to this nice little story you've got going with the boats. And I also loved how it kind of made the flag stand out there. It's funny how when you're tweaking colors and working with, lookup tables and things like that, how things come in and out of focus, things that get stressed and not stressed. So I did that. I put another layer on top of it where I did a really super sharpened black and white.
Oh yeah, kind of
mode, like this.
Yeah.
Brought down the opacity and put it like, what was I in, soft light? I'll never get it back again. And must have been hard light. No, maybe soft light. And put a little bit of an edge around it that way. And then I put a texture over the top to kind of play up that gold kind of antique type thing like we talked about before. And so it ended up out there. I saw this as something that you would print on like a metallic paper and kind of give that otherworldly type feeling to it. And so it tried to maintain the story that was there, but pushing the visual in a totally different direction.
I like it. The texture, the colors work, the sky works, and it's actually not that different than my head, believe it or not.
That's good.
Yeah, so I was actually in Venice last February when COVID hit, and they called off the last 2 days of Carnival because I was there for Carnival. So that was on my bucket list. So I'm glad I got to check that off before the world went crazy.
Yeah, I noticed when I was looking at the raw file, I was like, it looked like February 20. I was like, that must have been her last trip.
That was my last trip. I came home on the 28th and I haven't been out of the country since then. So yeah, it's a little strange for me because usually I'm all over the place.
All right, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Okay, so let's have a look at what I did. All right, so there's the original. And I don't know if my screen is just darker than yours. Does it look dark than you? It
looks dark.
Yeah, it's maybe a little dark. Yeah, it's a tiny bit dark. I think my screen is probably needs calibrating. Let me just turn it up a tiny little bit. There we go. Okay. So that was the original. Let me get this off.
Was this morning, evening? What was the situation?
Yeah, it's sunset and it's on a very famous bridge. There is no traffic. I don't know if you ever, there's no driving in Venice. There's no bicycles. There's no nothing because everything is walking or boating. So we had to take a ferry boat like all the way around. It's quite a long way to get there and then walk about 1 kilometer to get here. So it was quite a trek. I was doing a workshop with Italian photographer Ugo Che. And he lives in Milan and he does Venice every year for Carnival. So he's really experienced and knows the characters and where to go and everything. So this is the place to go for sunset because it's Grand Canal, right? So there's about like 100 other photographers there taking pictures. So that was my Lightroom edit. So I went with the original sky because the sky was kind of really pink. And I know what it was like because I was there when I took it, right? And I wanted to bring out those colors. So I felt like it was more pinky blue as opposed to the yellow. And then I pulled it into Luminar and I took it even farther with the painterly look. So I went a very similar direction with that you did with the painterly. And I went with a matte look, right? Like if I zoom in here, you could see that my blacks are not true black and it's a bit muted. And I went that way because I felt like it gave it that old world feel that is, Italy, right? That is Venice. So that's the direction I look. And that's just punching up the sky. So that's that sky AI Enhance, that does such a great job. I think, looking at it again now, I might, do a bit more work to bring out more detail in these piers here, and some of the shadows, but I'm happy with it in terms of color and tonality and the general feel.
Yeah, it's tough with something like this because I think you could make a really strong argument for making the focus be several different things in the image.
Right.
You wouldn't be wrong to say, well, that boat in the front right should be the focus, or the buildings should be the focus. I mean, and so there's a lot of different areas, and you almost have to pick one way or the other, or it just becomes overwhelming on the senses. I'm sure that's probably how it is live, but it's a very interesting scene that you could do a lot with.
It
So
is.
this was a really fun one to play with.
And I could definitely go black and white with it as well. Personally, I love doing black and white that is like a sepia tone. And what I'll do is I'll just add it into, I'm not a super fan of their new thing. I like the split toning better, but that's why I usually do it in Luminar. But I'll just tone the shadows as opposed to the rest, and leave the highlights and the midtones white and clear. So it gives it more of that true sort of, sepia.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny. We talked at the beginning about working on other people's images. For me, I find it's almost more freeing working on someone else's, because mine, I can't help but think of what was in my head when I created that image. And I'm very biased toward, I saw it as a moody thing, or I saw it as a whatever. But
Right.
with someone else's, you kind of just go potentially a completely different direction than what they would even want it to be. So to me, it was a little more freeing to
Interesting.
work on a different image.
Cool. Yeah, I could go a number of different ways with this one in black and white too. So
It almost looks like an etching.
yeah, it does. Well, then we could go into Topaz and do some Topaz studio in there to make it an etching, right? That's another question I get from a lot of my readers and followers a lot is, how do you know when to stop, right? Do you ever get that question? And for me, it's more just about like instinctual, and the more you do it, the more you sort of get a feel for it. But I also think it's a good idea to walk away for a while and come back a couple of days later, because when you've been looking at something for an hour or two, your eyes start to bug out and you get sort of hyper focused. So I find that if I come back the next day, then I look at it with fresh eyes and go, oh, okay, this is what I need to do, or it's done.
Yeah, a lot of times what I always try to do, and I'm not doing it 100% by any means, but you may have seen on some of my other ones that I did there, is I will always get it to where I want it before Luminar. I'll make a new layer and I'll call it Luminar. And sometimes that's all it is Luminar. But if I can remember, once I go in and do all that work in Luminar and I'll save it, like I called yours like Darlene Ballerina or whatever.
Right.
I went ahead and saved that template.
Right.
If I can remember, when I get back into Photoshop, I rename that layer LUM Darlene Ballerina or whatever.
Right.
And then I know, because that happens, I'm sure it happens to everybody, where you get one and then all of a sudden you decide that it'd be better to do, I like that look, but I want to do it to this image. And then you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, that happens with me with Topaz as well, where it's like, I did 50 things to it. I can't remember what, but if I can remember to save it, then I've got it on its own layer. I know what it is. And sometimes the next day, like you say, you come back and look at it and you go, that's too much. Let me just dial it back a little bit. And as long as you haven't done something structurally, like thinning the face or making the eyes bigger, or some of those things that you can do either in Photoshop or Luminar, as long as you haven't done those, you can really pull it back. And I've found a lot of times I want to pull it back because I've gone too far. Film grain, you mentioned earlier, I'm really bad about, I love that grit of the film grain. I'm like you, I miss the old Mamiya, but I liked that grain, but I tend to do too much of it. Saturation, I'll do a little too much. And then it's like the next day you got to come back and look at it and say, let me bring that back a little bit. And so I always try and do it on another layer. Now that tends to give you these ginormous files, but I don't know, to me, that's just the cost of having a little bit of control later.
Well, I opened this one up again because I wanted to show like the way that I do mine is I'll if I'm going to do it in Photoshop, I'll actually open it as a smart object. So I've applied the Luminar as a smart filter so that I can just get back into Luminar and, you know, see where I'm at and continue from there, right? So I do the same. And if I have several images that are similar, or I think I might want to use that look again, I'll save it as a template for sure. But that's kind of my workflow is, you know, if it's one that I'm really gonna go to town on. You see, I was playing around in here on the sheep as well. So yeah, let's not do the sheep double. So I was playing with cloning the sheep. I was trying to use the Photoshop move tool as well, but it wasn't so successful. But.
Yeah, this is one of those weird fields where it looks like there's cloning tracks all over the place. Like I feel like I'm looking at it and it's like, oh, I can see cloning here. I can see where they clone the ground. And it's like, that's just what it looks like. What's so funny about this is, if I'm not, it's like, I took this a long time ago, but I believe if you turned around from taking this picture, it's Stonehenge. Like you're standing at Stonehenge and you turn and look the other direction, and this is the other direction. And so it's just so funny that you're at such a famous place and you're taking a picture of sheep. Right. You know, but it's an odd look, you know, and so
you can see I applied the mystical here, which I like. I did put a LUT on it because it was kind of like a more orangey brown. I did the dramatic, which I like a lot. And then
I think I used wooden on one of these images this time. I used wooden on one of them. I just noticed it on yours. I was like, I used wooden on one of them. That's a cool one.
It's one I use a lot, actually. Yeah, I use it a fair bit. So there we go.
That's interesting.
All right. Let me stop there. Well, thanks for this experiment. That was kind of fun. I think we did a lot of fun. That different. Your ballerina was definitely different. So different take on that one for sure.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think it's always interesting just to try different things and see how two different people look at different things. But I will definitely make sure and put the link to your channel in my description, and hopefully people will come check that out. And you can give them mine as well. And hopefully we can keep up with each other and maybe do another one of these somewhere down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my channel's Digital Photo Mentor, and it's my website as well, digitalphotomentor.com.
Fantastic. Well, it was great talking to you, and I will see you again soon.
Thanks so much, Larry.
All righty. Bye-bye. So there you have it. We really ended up with some great images. I hope you enjoyed it. I do hope you'll check out Darlene's channel. It's down below in the comments. Some great content on there. And while you're down in the comments, make sure you leave me a comment and let me know which of these images you liked best. Which was your favorite one out of the whole batch? Hopefully it's one of mine. Surely it's one of mine. I'm hoping it's one of mine. If not, no worries. Just put your favorite down there and we'll see which one gets the most interest. By the way, if you don't already have Luminar AI, you can use the discount code LarryPhoto to get it at a discount, and I will put that information down below as well. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of information down in the comments, so you definitely probably want to check that out before you leave. I'm just saying. But that's all I've got for this week. It really has been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye. If you have not already done so, please take a second to subscribe. If you haven't already done so, please take a second to subscribe. I don't know why I'm doing this with my hands.